This is Becoming UnDone.
First things first, a simple request. Stick with me. I promise. This entire episode really is about Larry Johnson. Eventually. It might take me a minute to get there, but I will. I swear. So stick around. I will never forget that bus ride. It was the fall of 1987, in the middle to the back of my rickety old yellow dog school bus with the green vinyl seats because it wasn't new enough for the cooler, more modern brown vinyl seats. Who am I kidding? In the middle. Squarely in the middle of that bus because all the cool high school kids sat in the back, and me, being an awkward and inept 12-year-old 7th grader, had not yet achieved that level of social status yet. Anyhow, me in the middle. Cool kids in the back. You get the picture. I hear the faint sound of what appeared to be a police scanner coming from behind me. As the sound continued, it became clearer that this isn't a police scanner at all brought on board by some curious 11th grader. It's music. I grew up in rural southern Illinois in a place you've never heard of, in a county so small that it still registers less than 0.1% of the population of Illinois. Statistically, it doesn't exist. The Pope County Community Unit School District is a pre-K through 12th grade school operation that serves the entire county, including just 2 schools, and is today home to less than 450 total students. Just like it pretty much did when I was a kid. In a district that small, yet geographically so spread out, long bus rides are just part of the deal. I once heard a statistic that I've lost to time and can't be supported through a Google search, but I recall hearing a number that in my county, home to less than 500 kids, we had more than 1,000 miles of unpaved roads. Every time it snowed, it seemed like school was canceled. One year in grade school, we did not have school at all, not one day, in January. My ride was about 30 miles from the end of my gravel driveway to school, but it was more than an hour one way with all the stops and detours to pick up all of the 40-some-odd kids on the route for bus number 1. All that to say, with 2 hours together every day, the long haulers of us who lived furthest from the school had some time on our hands. 10 hours a week, 36 or so weeks a year, 10 and a half years. I got my license midway through my sophomore year and finally got to drive myself to school. But the rough math here is around 3,800 hours. Or put another way, 157.5 full days of my life have been spent sitting on a school bus. Our bus driver, Sue, was cool at first, but she got pretty grouchy in her old age. She drove my school bus on my first day of kindergarten, and she was also behind the wheel the last time I rode it in high school, probably when I was too broke for gas money as a junior or something. We had assigned seats and we were allowed to talk, but one rule she always had without exception: no music. Now, nobody had cell phones. We were usually too poor or too afraid someone would steal our Walkman or eventually our Discman to bring them. So no music. Just the deafening sound of that creaky old bus's tires roaring on the pavement, the blacktop, or the gravel, depending on where we were. But not that day. Shannon Clark, a high schooler, had snuck her dual cassette stereo. Not big enough to be a boombox, but big enough to also not be just a lame tape recorder. And she had just one tape that she was playing. LL Cool J's Bigger and Deafer. At that point, I had never heard it, but when the drums began to build and LL kicked in with the I knew without question who it was. Bigger and Deafer was LL's second studio album, and I'd been waiting to buy it for a while, saving up. His first album, Radio, debuted in 1985, when I was just 10 years old. And I regularly listened to a dubbed, pirated copy while I played basketball. If you're too young to know what that means, back in the day, we had dual cassette decks. High-speed dubbing if you were really cool. And in the event one of your friends had forked over 10 to 12 bucks for a tape of your favorite artist, you could buy a blank for about $1 and copy it over. I would take my little detachable speakers GE boombox out to my court and shoot for hours, while I Can't Live Without My Radio played.
My radio, believe me, I like it loud. I'm the man with the box that can rock the crowd. Walking down the street to the hardcore beat while my JVC vibrates the concrete.
Or my all-time favorite basketball practice jam, Basketbal by Curtis Blow.
They're playing basketball. We love that basketball. They're playing basketball. We love that basketball.
And while not the absolute top of the list, L was close. I wanted that new album, however I could get it, even if it meant straining as hard as I could from my lame middle-of-the-bus seat while it played faintly and illegally from Shannon Clark's contraband de-energizer-powered tape deck. I'm Bad was even better than anything I'd heard on radio. I was locked in as an LL fan for life. Walking with a Panther was his third album. It released in June 1989, and it was solid. Memorable cuts for me as a 15-year-old sophomore to be were I'm That Type of Guy, Going Back to Cali,
Cali. I'm going back to Cali. I don't think so.
and Jingling Baby.
Go ahead, baby.
They're jiggling, baby.
Go ahead, baby.
They're jiggling, baby.
Go ahead, baby.
They're jiggling, baby.
Go ahead, baby.
But honestly, it had gotten a little buried in my rotation behind groups or acts that were newer in my mind, like Bubba DeVoe, Bismarcky,
You got what I need, but you say he's just a friend, and you say he's just a friend.
Young MC,
Bust it.
By this time, I'd abandoned cassettes in favor of CDs, and in the process failed to even buy Walking with a Panther. I borrowed it from some friends for a time or two, but I didn't love it. It wasn't bad, but LL's sound wasn't moving the needle for me like it once had. Turns out I wasn't alone. Although the album peaked at number 6 on the Billboard 200 and hit number 1 on the top R&B hip-hop albums chart, it was met with a lukewarm response from the hip-hop community, with many criticizing the heavy inclusion of ballads. Although it still went platinum, I was afraid LL was trending in the wrong direction. All that changed with LL's next, and in my opinion, unquestionably best album, Mama Said Knock You Out, in the fall of 1990. It was tremendous for more reasons than I could count. Now, in a streaming era, I feel like the sensory experience that accompanied a new album has been lost. First, there was the smell. When you buy a new CD, once you're able to peel up that cellophane outer wrapper, you can smell the unmistakable scent of that plastic jewel case. Then you have to hold that case just right. Right thumb and middle finger gripping the backside of the case, then left hand thumb and middle finger squeezing those weird grooves on the side as you gently swing the cover open. But be careful. Inevitably, one or more of those hinge tabs are going to snap off, and even the pointy disc holder spindle thingy's going to break, and your CD's going to look and function like crap. So you had to take it all in at first. It would most likely never be this perfect again. The disc had artwork, and the liner notes would be your reading assignment for the night. Albums with the lyrics were definitely preferred over those without, and I'll never forget my first all-clear CD case, Living Colors Time's Up, which had artwork inside and out, instead of that lame, plain gray liner that holds the disc. The first track, the booming system, was all about cruising with a bass-heavy stereo in your car, which I did and which I loved.
Check it out. You know it's funky, 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 cause you heard it from hearsay. A jam that you love that don't be getting no airplay. Strictly for frontin' when you're riding around.
Sidebar here, it's not the song with the best bass. That would be Farmers Boulevard.
Know what I'm saying? Yo, let's go back on farming and get some of them early MCs used to be kicking it with back in the day. Yeah. Yo, let's do a jam with them. I bet. But first I gotta introduce it, you know what I'm saying? Alright, kick it.
But without question, my favorite song on the album then and now was and is Mama Said Knock You Out.
Come on, man.
And with the local DBC news, LL Cool J with a triumphant comeback. More a solo. But tonight,
Don't call it a comeback.
LL comes out swinging with that unmistakable, don't call it a comeback line. He's angry, energized, hungry. It was a perfect workout song. And that driving hip-hop beat over some classic scratches and that gruff delivery, even right now, makes me want to work out just a little harder every time I hear it. But if I'm honest, I didn't really get what Mama had to do with the whole thing. So I wondered about it for a minute. And then I went and did something else. Now, I've told my kids about this, but in 1990, sometimes we just didn't know stuff. There was nowhere to go in order to know it. My high school library had virtually no information about music, let alone something as specific as the genesis for the lyrics that appear on Song 8 of James Todd Smith's fourth studio album. So for years, I just loved the song, and I didn't know why he said what he said. I stumbled across a Rolling Stone interview from 2020 where LL discussed the song and the fact that its 30-year anniversary was coming. Talking with author Corey Glow, L said, quote, "The title line, Mama Said Knock You Out, came from my grandmother. I was beefing, moaning, and griping about what people were saying with Walking with a Panther. I've always been a guy who liked to experiment and to be free in the studio. I've never stuck to a script. And in hip-hop, people don't always appreciate that. In other genres, people appreciate it when a guy like Prince does experimental albums and projects. I guess for whatever reason, it didn't hit the mark like it did for some people. So my grandmother was like, yeah, get out there and knock 'em out. And I was like, yeah, knock 'em out. So from there, I remember the beat playing, and I was just like, don't call it a comeback. It just felt right. It was right from the spirit." End quote. That sentiment caused me to stop in my tracks. It wasn't just something LL said within the confines of the now classic lyrics. It was actually something that was said to him to inspire him to press on with an ambitious new, and some would argue back to his roots, fourth studio album. And it actually was said by his grandmother. It had literally never crossed my mind that a global superstar like LL Cool J, who after 3 albums already and more than 2 million copies sold, would even need such encouragement, let alone from his actual mama, or in this case, grandmama. As it turns out, encouragement from mama might be exactly what someone needs to chase their dreams. Consider the story of Larry Johnson. Larry grew up in a single-parent home in the Dixon Circle housing projects in South Dallas. His mother Dorotha watched her son grow and flourish, even in the midst of drug deals in the streets and rampant violence in the neighborhood. In an article that appeared in a 1992 issue of Sports Illustrated, author Lee Montville described the scene. Quote, "Larry Johnson played basketball. There was another summer, a couple of summers, when the cops built a little police station in the middle of the projects simply to handle the upswing in business. Drugs were everywhere, and guns were everywhere, and this seemed to be the proper response, the little police station. Larry Johnson played basketball." Unquote. Despite the surroundings, Dorotha saw her son blossoming into a young man with a passion for basketball. Quote, "I'd look out the window, it'd be so late, and there he was. Always basketball." End quote. Larry was strong and athletic, looking more like a football linebacker than a typical long and lanky small forward of the era. Johnson recalled playing QB at the age of 9 in a 14U Pop Warner team. He also recalled playing as a freshman when, in his words, "I was playing JV football and varsity basketball as a freshman, and I got hit. I got one of those freshman hits and went straight to the basketball court. As his basketball talents continued to blossom, his mother began to see opportunities for her son. Redbird Rec Center director, the late Alex Mudd Gillum, began to notice Larry's growing skill set. Sadly, neither Dortha nor Mudd are around to tell the story of how ultimately Dortha decided her son's best shot at his young dreams of playing in the NBA might be to move schools. Dortha decided to take advantage of a transfer rule at the time that allowed Dallas ISD kids to opt to attend a school outside of their immediate geographic neighborhood, but still in DISD. It was a desegregation program called Majority to Minority, or M&M. Under the policy, Larry was allowed to opt out of attending Lincoln High School, where districting lines had previously dictated he would go. After having multiple conversations around the neighborhood, Dortha decided her son's opportunities would be best served at nearby Skyline High School. Lincoln was a majority black school situated just 1.6 miles from the Dixon Circle projects, while Skyline was still pretty close, at least by my 1 hour each way on the bus standards, at just 3.6 miles away. Newer, larger, and with more opportunities than Lincoln, Skyline also had something else. J.D. Mayo and a highly successful basketball program. Notable athletic alumni like NBA player Spud Webb, not to mention NFL players Dante Jones, Tim Jackson, even Olympic gold medalist Michael Johnson, had called Skyline home. But more than that, Dortha had heard about the program Coach Mayo had built and the cornerstones of team first, selflessness, and total commitment. LJ reflected on his upbringing recently in an open and honest Facebook post. In it, he wrote, quote, "A little bit of my story. I grew up in the housing projects of South Dallas, Dixon Circle, Terrible, Texas. For me, basketball was a way out. Not only for me, but for my mom and sister. We were poor. I mean, dirt poor. I never knew my father, but we were rich in other ways. I refused to blame anyone for our circumstances. My mindset was if you want something, practice. When you think you're the best, practice more. My advice is to never give up. Don't blame others. Own your mistakes and work hard at doing the right things. Practice kindness and take care of your mind and body." Unquote. In those words, you can hear the facts about a hard upbringing. But more than that, you hear thankfulness, gratitude, reflection. Now, it's impossible to tell what would have happened if Dortha hadn't intervened and sent her son to Skyline. Would the world know Larry Johnson today? I'd argue most likely. But in the process, he wouldn't have connected with mentor and father figure J.D. Mayo. Who knows if he earns accolades like Parade All-American or McDonald's All-American or the most heavily recruited high school senior in his class. But one thing is certain. Mama Dortha said, "Get out there and knock 'em out." And that's exactly what he did. Joining me today is legendary Texas high school basketball coach J.D. Mayo. Coach Mayo was Larry's coach in high school and has been a mentor and a figure in his life ever since. Coach Mayo, thanks so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure and honor.
Well,
And just to make the record straight, coaches receive accolades because of those players. And when the players do what you ask them to do, we call that execution.
I love it.
But Larry and those players are the legends and the Hall of Famers.
Well, I'm looking forward to digging into your story a little bit, but also Larry. So tell me a little bit about your background and how you ended up at Skyline where your paths first crossed.
I did my practice teaching at Dallas 8th grade Spruce High School. And after the principal observed me the first day or so, this is the way I remember things. And I just try to tell it from my memory. But the principal, Mr. Bruce Norman, was a very godly man, unbeknownst to me. And after observing me for a day or two, he said, "I'm hiring you to be the assistant basketball coach for $300 for the year." And little did I know I had to raise that money by selling ads for a basketball poster. And he said, "I'm hiring you to be a teacher." And then he said, "I want you to start a fellowship of Christian athletes." And he began to tell me the story that Coach Landry of the Cowboys and the staff. They brought FCA to Dallas-Fort Worth in the late 60s. And this was like 1971. And he said, I want you to go to a meeting and come back and start a huddle. And that's what I did. I went to the meeting, and I was 21, 22 years old. And when I walked into the meeting, I began to see players and assistant coaches from the Cowboys that I watch on TV. So I'm just gawking at all these different players. And I see like number 12 for the younger folks. Number 12, that would be...
Roger Staubach.
Yes, sir. Then I saw some assistant coaches, and number 74, saw him. You probably know who that is too.
You're a little before I came in around the Danny White era of the Cowboys.
Oh,
So I
okay.
know Roger Staubach, but that's about the limit of my 70s Cowboys knowledge.
That's Bob Lilly.
Okay, yeah. He's in the
And,
Ring of Honor, yeah.
Yes, sir. And up in our stairs there on the landing, there's a framed photo that Leroy Neiman, I think he maybe drew it or painted it. I'm not sure. But anyway, it's Coach Landry, Dallas Cowboys. And that's about the only football thing I have in my house. And it's on the landing. And it shows Coach Landry, and it shows they're in their uniforms, Roger Staubach
Yeah,
and Bob Lilly.
yeah.
And so I came back to Blackville. I went and sat down, and there was a space at the front of the building. And so went to the first row, sat down, and I'm still just gawking at all those folks. And I looked to my right, the guy sitting next to me, and I didn't say anything to him. I just thought to myself, man, that looks like Coach Landry to me. And so I just kept gawking, and I finally got up enough nerve to tap him on the shoulder. I said, excuse me, sir, I hate to bother you, but you sure look like Coach Tom Landry to me. He said, I am. I introduced myself to Coach Landry and came back and started the FCA. And this day, those kids from the early 70s, in fact, they invited me to speak at their 1971 50-year reunion, 72 class, 73. Then their 74s coming up. I don't know if they'll invite me to speak or not, but they asked me to speak at those other reunions. And nearly all those kids talked about FCA. I opened it up to everybody.
Yeah.
Not just athletes.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a lot of folks.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of fun. We went on some endeavors, camps, and things like that. It was quite the deal. And that's really how it started. And my boyhood idol was the head basketball coach at Spruce. 6'8", 6'9" guy that I'd followed. I grew up in the country in the free state of Van Zandt County. And we didn't receive the newspaper, but Mr. Sweeney, who owned the service station where my dad would stop each day before going out to the farming or the ranching, whatever we were doing that day, he'd usually stop there in the mornings and afternoons. And Mr. Sweeney would let me read the newspaper. And I love sports. And so I began to follow this 6'8", 6'9" guy that was always in the newspaper. He played at Samuel High School.
Okay.
And he was all state. Then he went to University of Texas. I followed him in the newspaper in the University of Texas. And he was my boyhood idol growing up. I loved the name John Paul Fultz, F-U-L-T-Z, and he was always the leading scorer and rebounder. And that's where I started my first coaching, is there at Spruce.
Yeah.
For 5 years.
I totally understand that. That's how this whole project got started for me, because that figure in my life was Larry Johnson. I loved the way he played. I loved the energy that he brought. And there's just something inspiring to me about someone who plays with that kind of love for the game. What would you say is your earliest memory of Larry Johnson?
Oh, the earliest memory, I watched him play at John B. Hood Junior High. And Ms. Johnson and Larry lived in the Dixon Circle projects. And his home school was Lincoln High School. And at that time, there was a transfer that a parent could fill out called majority to a minority. So if your race was majority, like at Lincoln, Larry's race was a majority, they could transfer to a school where your race was in a minority. They called it M&M. And unbeknownst to me, Miss Johnson had filled out a transfer. And right before school started in the 9th grade, I watched Larry play in junior high. In junior high, it was like, I think, 7th, 8th grade. Or John B. Hood, but I didn't recruit. He recruit players. I'd go to different junior highs and watch them play. But Miss Johnson actually called the school right before Larry's freshman year and wanted to talk to me. And so we talked and set up a meeting. I still didn't know what it was about for the next day. And that's when Miss Johnson, that's when I met her. And that's when she told me that we sat down and she called him DD. His middle name's Demetrius. She said, DD, I don't know this man and you don't either, but he's going to help you to be a better man, better student, and better player. And I jumped up out of my seat. I said, Miss Johnson, thank you so much. That's exactly what we do. She said, oh, I know. Coach said, that's talk on the streets of Dixon Circle. You help kids be their best.
Yeah.
Not just in hoops, but about their life and academics and hoops. All three of them. And I said, yes, ma'am, that's right. And it's in that order. But if their life is not in order, they're not going to play. And if their academics are not in order, they're not going to play.
Yeah. At that time, that Dixon Circle project was a rough upbringing, and going to Skyline had to have been a little bit of a culture shock. What was that adjustment period like for Larry when he transferred to your school there at Dallas Skyline?
He handled things real well. At that meeting, we talked a lot about the team, about humility, serving others, that the team it's all about the team. It's not about me, the coach, not about Larry, the player, but it's about the team and everybody. I call it totally compelled, buying in to what the coach asked you to do. And Larry did that. And, of course, his mother was the first to do it because she's the one that told him that he was going to play for us. Then she said, DD, I understand he runs a pretty tight ship. And you're going to do what he asks you to do. You're not going to whine, moan, gripe, or complain. He's 6'2". He was 190. Shoulders were wide, just, I don't know, 3 or 4 feet wide, looked to me in a real tiny waist. It was God-given ability.
Yeah. Well, those Skyline teams of the late 80s were dominant. How would you describe Larry's contributions to the team? He transfers in, and how did he change? Obviously, by the time I started to notice him, he wasn't 190 pounds anymore. He was full grown. So in that progression from sophomore, junior, senior, what did you see in him that maybe stood out the most?
He had a determination to do his best. So he bought in and he worked hard like the rest of them. And I tell you when I knew I had him, because right after that meeting, I called his house, and he answered the phone, and he answered the phone with this word. He said, yeah. And I'm on the other end, and I just go silent. He said, yeah. I said, is this Mr. Johnson? He said, Coach, oh, I'm so sorry. He said, I didn't know that was you. I said, Mr. Johnson, you don't really know who's calling. And in the next few years, you'll not know who's calling. What I'm thinking is that you might want to answer the phone with a hello, or at least a hi, that you don't know. He said, I thought it was one of my buddies. I said, you just never know. I said, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to hang this phone up. I'm going to call you back. And I expect at least a hello or a hi. I hang the phone up, and I'm thinking to myself, he needs to learn a little etiquette here. We'll see how it goes. So I call him again, and this is what he said. Real loud. He said, hello, sir. I said, thank you. And I'd call him Mr. Johnson about half the time. Oh, Coach, you just call me Larry. I said, could call you DD. He said, oh, no, don't call me DD. That's what my mama calls. I said, I noticed that in the meeting. So I knew then that he was going to make adjustments.
Yeah, a teachable spirit for sure.
Is spirit of excellence, because and this is what and she also said he's going to help you get where you want to go in that meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So I said to Larry, where do you want to go? What do you want to be? He said, oh, Coach, since I was a child, I've dreamed of playing in the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, son, I don't make that promise to you, but this is what I do promise you. I'll give you my best, my BEST, in improving your life, improving your academics, and improving your playing. Your part is to do what we ask you to do. And of course, our system was quite different than probably a lot of systems in that meeting. And Miss Johnson knew. I said, after every game and practices, we shower, shave, shampoo, shower shoes, use a little deodorant, some magic food. And the kids loved that magic food. And if they didn't have provided soap and deodorant and all kind of things for the kids, and we dressed up on game day. In fact, Miss Johnson asked me about that. I said, yes, ma'am. We dress up every game day, and we have, and I said, by the way, if you don't have a lot of neckties, we have plenty of neckties. We help the kids out, and I'd bring some of my neckties. And the next day she called me. She said, Coach, I just wanted you to know I got 2 neckties. I said, well, that's good. She said, I went by the Goodwill. And when she said that, my eyes started tearing up. She said, I went by the Goodwill and I bought 2 neckties. I think it was for $25. Of course, I knew she was totally bought in, totally compelled, or she wouldn't have brought him over to Skyline.
Mm-hmm.
And she wanted him to be under her tutelage. So we taught the kids, when you wash your hands at the sink, you wash them real good, then you get a paper towel and you wipe down the sink so it's clean. Not for you, but it's clean for the next person.
Mm.
And in the locker room, that's your teammate. Up in the school, in the restroom, that'll be a classmate.
Right.
You may know them, you may not.
Mm.
But you're doing it to serve, and you're doing it not for you, but you're doing it for the next person. That's part of that humility.
Yeah. Famously, Michael Jordan didn't make his high school varsity team his sophomore year, and everyone tends to point to that as, don't give up when things don't go your way. It doesn't sound like Larry had that same type of process in high school. When did he start playing varsity and really starting to be a contributor on those Skyline teams?
The first day, we really worked hard, and we had a program of getting in shape to play the game, conditioning. We had some strength and weightlifting, and we also practiced. Then he'd practice on his own. And I'd call different parents, moms. Many of them just had a mom like Larry. And Larry's told me quite a few times I was the closest thing to a dad that he ever had.
Mm-hmm.
And usually when we hang up, when we talk on the phone or sometimes in person, he'll say, I love you and thank you for all you did.
Wow. That's what it's all about.
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir, it sure is. Larry bought in and he worked hard.
Yeah. And those accolades came. McDonald's All-American as a senior and is headed to SMU, and that kind of fell apart from the sounds of it last minute, where academically there were some issues, and he ends up at Odessa College. What do you remember about that situation that led Larry, first of all, to SMU and then eventually to Odessa?
Coach Bliss was the head coach at SMU, and he spent a lot of time. He wanted Larry and recruited Larry, and his staff recruited Larry. And remember that they had gone through the death penalty as well. But Larry was real excited about going. And the president of the university, Dr. Pye, called a meeting with a lot of his vice presidents and lawyers. And in fact, I'd get a call time to time from one of his vice presidents saying, "Does Larry have a new car?" I said, "Let me put it to you this way. I took him home after workout today. If he does, I have no idea where it might be because he rode with me. And then we just did what we needed to do to help the kids. We played in a lot of tournaments, and he got a lot of publicity. He was also the national high school basketball player of the year. And that year had a lot of juniors and seniors, and nearly all of them. Bob Gibbons' publication was the name of it. I still have it up in the office. And I could tell they were on edge, at least people I talked to that would call me from SMU, not Coach Bliss, but in that meeting, Dr. Pye, there were quite a few in the meeting. Dr. Pye, he just felt like Larry wouldn't be successful academically at SMU. And he spoke about it. I didn't say much, I just listened, but in the end, I did raise my hand, and he gave me an opportunity to speak. I told him all those people sitting around the table had PhDs, very smart, intelligent, and I'm just a country boy from the free state of Van Zandt County. I said, it is a little amazing to me how you can predict what a person can do and can't do. I know there's trends and things like that. This young man's a hard worker. He wants to do things the right way. And so when the meeting was over, Larry obviously didn't feel like that was his home.
Right.
And Miss Johnson was there, and myself and Larry. And it was a room full of the president, vice president, and some lawyers. And so we walking out, I said, "Larry, we didn't know that was coming." And I said, "That's a shocker." He said, "Coach, I think I want to go play basketball with my buddy Tony Jackson from North Dallas High School." And I'd met Tony. We played against him. I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, we're good friends." I said, "We talked to the coach and told him that." And Odessa, a lot of the junior colleges, they recruit. And I know Coach Helms and his assistant coaches. Fletcher Cockrell was one of his assistant coaches, and he was a great recruiter too. And said, "You sure that's what you want to do?" And he said he was sure. And we called Coach Helms, and of course they were tad elated. It all just happened,
Right.
Just quickly. I did take Larry. There's a junior college in Navarro College, of Corsicana. In fact, it was Coach Orr, who was assistant at SMU before Coach Bliss came. But Coach Orr was the assistant coach at SMU back in the 70s. And he was supposed to get the job when, I can't remember the head coach's name. Goodness, sorry about that. But anyway, they changed AD, athletic directors. He didn't get the job, so he needed a job. So he took the job at Skyline. But he never coached a varsity game again. Coach Fultz left and went to Lakeview, and I was still at Spruce, and Coach Orr brought his Skyline. That was in 1976, and Coach Orr never coached a varsity game because Navarro College opened up. And Coach Orr went to Navarro College, and the principal at Skyline hired me. I didn't apply for the job. I was like 26, 27 years old. I'd been assistant for 5 years. But anyway, I took Larry by Navarro College, took him by MCC as well. And when the day was over, Larry wanted to go to Odessa, so we flew to Odessa College. I'd ask Coach Helms, just keep it low key. I'd get calls every day from some newspaper, TV station, all over the United States, wanting to know what's going on. And early in the mornings, late at night. And so when we get off the airplane, I guess the word had got out, and there were signs, welcome, LJ. And then we got in the car, and then there were signs, different businesses. Welcome, LJ. That's pretty funny. Yeah.
I've been to Odessa, and it's not Dallas. That I'm sure that there was a little bit of a culture shock to heading out that way, but it sounds like Larry was all business. It was a basketball move and a professional decision in a lot of ways.
Yes, it was. And they did what they said they would do. Odessa, they need direction. And Coach Cockrell, assistant coach, and Coach Helms, they worked with Larry and all those kids. And Coach Helms is an outstanding coach. He taught the fundamentals of the game as well. And Larry felt right at home. Of course, there was Tony Jackson right there with him.
Yeah.
And then the team, they brought in a lot of really good players as well. And I got to watch them play.
Yeah, not too far down the road. One of the things I remember people talking about, so I first became a fan in his UNLV days, and they were so athletic, especially Larry, just physical, strong, could jump out of the gym. This was at a time when basketball players didn't always embrace the weight room, and you kind of alluded to this. What did his workouts look like in high school? Would you say he was more a product of hard work, genetics, or maybe a little bit of both?
He had this physique that was God-given. And he had a mother, that told him in front of me, you're going to do what Coach asked you to do, and you're not going to whine and moan, grab her plane. He's going to help you to get where you want to get. She said those words, paraphrasing. And that's when I said to Larry, what do you want to be? What do you want to get in life? And that's when he told me about the NBA. And then when I told him I'd give him my best, he just had to give me his best, and he had to give the team the best. And he did.
Yeah.
The only disagreement that we might have had some, I can't quite remember, but whatever height he was, he wanted me to lift him an inch taller because he had shoes on. And so I finally gave in his senior year. I said, just do what you're supposed to do. I'll consider that your senior year. But he did a great job in the hallways. The kids at Skyline loved him. They loved him. Teachers loved him because he was nice. We taught him to be nice, kind, love each other. The good book has 2 commandments in the New Testament. I think that's right. I'm not a theologian, but I love studying the Bible. And those 2 commandments in the New Testament is love the Lord with everything you have, totally compelled. Then it says love your neighbor.
Yeah.
As yourself, even if your neighbor is a heathen. And your classmate may not be nice to you, or your teammate may not be nice to you, but you take the high road. You love them anyway. The good book says you love them, forgive them, pray for them, then bless them. Now, who can do that? And it takes something real special in your heart and mind. And so we taught them a lot about service. We just did a lot of things about service, from opening doors for ladies and just being nice and kind, polite. In fact, I taught our players, we had 6 Be Quicks, and one of the 6 Be Quicks is I love you. Another one is thank you. So we would teach those guys to go home, and after said hello to whoever's taking care of them, their mom, grandmother, they at least say I love you and say thank you.
Yeah.
Of course, Miss Johnson loved that. Parents loved that.
Sure. This show is all about failure and how failure and adversity can sometimes be exactly what we needed in order to eventually succeed. And at this stage of the game, this is a big setback. In D1 athletics and basketball, that's a goal for a lot of people who, at the time, you didn't go straight into the NBA or there weren't international players. So a D1 basketball player was a step toward Larry's goal. And that didn't happen. And he ends up at a junior college. Do you think if Larry Johnson doesn't go to Odessa College that the story ends the same? Or do you think that was a critical part of his story?
I think it was awesome that immediately after the meeting with the president of SMU and his staff, Larry wants to go play with his friend, Tony Jackson, who was at North Dallas High School. And of course, he knew Coach Cockrell, Coach Helms as well, because they had recruited. You just never know how things work out. So they always dot the I's and cross the T's as a coaching staff.
Yeah. And it reminds you that you always want to leave as well as possible because you never know where your paths are going to intersect again.
Oh, absolutely. And you want to leave things better than it was. And you want to always not have to look over your shoulder because you treated people the right way.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things we taught our players and my students.
For sure.
We used the Zig Ziglar approach. We used FCA. All that came into play.
Yeah.
And most of them are biblical principles.
Yeah.
And there's a common sense, a common principle. Treat people the way you want to be treated.
Mm-hmm.
Be nice, be kind. Compete on the floor. But we didn't mouth at the officials, and I wouldn't allow the players to whine, moan, gripe, complain.
Sure.
For them. I mean, I'd do a little discussion with them.
As my son's coach would say, high decibel encouragement.
Oh, yeah. That's good.
Well, Coach, last question, and this is maybe harder for you than just about anybody because you've had a whole lifetime with him, but if you had to pick out one memory that stands out in your mind about Larry Johnson, what would it be and why?
Oh, man, that'd be tough to pick out one. One thing. I know this only, he still works for the Knicks. He's an ambassador. And he shakes the hands and he's at all the games, kisses the babies and does some TV work. And there are just so many. One of the spiritual things I can, like, if he were to call me today or if I called him and we talked on the phone, if I didn't ask to pray for him, he'd ask me, will you say a prayer for me, Coach?
That's powerful. That's a legacy, Coach. That I can't think of a better compliment of a coach's legacy than a player of any caliber, let alone someone of Larry's caliber, making that request on the phone. That's powerful.
I was at his home in Charlotte. It was on a Sunday afternoon that he received the call that Mr. Shin owned the Hornet. He wanted to get actually rid of Larry's youth contract. Larry had the largest in sports history at one time, all guaranteed, and Alonzo Mourning.
Mm-hmm.
And Larry wanted to be a Hornet. Larry's very loyal to his coaches. He's loyal to the colleges and to his college coaches. He's just very loyal to his mom. We had her funeral at our church. Then we had another funeral down in East Texas. And 2 funerals for her. Mm-hmm. And Larry was at both of them, as he should have been. But he was just very loyal, very faithful.
Yeah.
To his.
They loved him in Charlotte. The first guy I talked to was he was the PR director for the Hornets. And that franchise was the first time they had pro sports. Pro athletes there were on a whole different level than a Dallas athlete. Yeah, they'll be noticed, but in Charlotte, they were it. And he was the pinnacle of that it. And yeah, lots of great stories about what a celebrity he was in Charlotte.
And he's humble. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he came to Dallas and did some signings, autographs on several different occasions. Converse. Mm-hmm. And he gave, and it was all cash in these brown bags. And he gave all of it to our church. He helped build one of the buildings at our church in Mesquite. He loved hoops and he loved people. And he loved our pastor, who was my brother-in-law, and he loved our church. It was beautiful.
Yeah. Well, Coach, I sure appreciate your time.
Thank you.
This has been an honor. I absolutely loved it, and I'm thankful that you were willing to share a little bit of your story and Larry's.
To God be the glory. That's the reason we coached.
Yep.
I discovered that purpose early in life.
Yep.
I am J.D. Mayo, and I'm undone.
For Coach Mayo, it's been a long and fulfilling career, impacting young lives through the game of basketball. And you can hear the pride in his voice when he talks about the most successful player he ever coached, Larry Johnson. I'm thankful to Coach Mayo for dropping in, and I hope you enjoyed our conversation. For more info on today's episode, be sure to check it out on the web. Simply go to undonepodcast.com/EP93 to see the notes, links, and images related to today's guest, J.D. Mayo. Next time on the Becoming UnDone docuseries, The Making and Remaking of Larry Johnson, I'll talk to my friend Dr. Kwame Brown, a professor, neuroscientist, and psychologist from the East Coast. Dr. Brown is both an alum and spent 8 years as a professor at an HBCU, and we get open and raw about the social and societal impact of the early 90s NBA in America, where prolific stars like LJ and Allen Iverson became popular around the world, all the way to rural spots in middle America, like where I grew up. That and more in part 3. After that, we've still got a long way to go, but in part 4, I talked to Larry's first college coach, Dennis Helms from Odessa College, as we dig in and analyze the Pony Excess death penalty scandal that rocked SMU, where Larry originally signed, and sent him west to junior college. And will we ever get to hear from the Converse execs about that grandmama ad campaign? Maybe. Stick around and find out. I know there are great stories out there to be told, and I'm always on the lookout. So if you or someone you know has a story that we can all be inspired by, tell me about it. Surf on over to undonepodcast.com, click the contact tab in the top menu, and drop me a note. I'll see you again next Thursday. Becoming UnDone is a Nitro Hype creative production written and produced by me, Toby Brooks. Tell a friend about the show and follow along on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Becoming UnDone Pod. And follow me at Toby J. Brooks on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Check out my link tree at linktr.ee/TobyJBrooks. Listen, subscribe, and please leave me a review at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Have you met my grandmama? Yo, Kevin, you all right, man? Kevin.
Until next time, keep getting better.